You know, when you've been married for nearly 2 decades, you think you've got a pretty good read on your spouse. You know how they take their coffee, what TV shows they secretly binge when you're not around, and, most importantly, when something's off. And something was definitely off with Lisa. It started small, as these things always do. A shift in energy, a certain distance in her voice when we talked. She quit her job a few months ago, saying she wanted a break from the stress. Said she wanted to focus on the house, maybe pick up a new hobby. I didn't argue. I made good money, and if staying home made her happy, why not? But here's the thing, she wasn't home as much as she claimed. I'd call during lunch just to check in, see how her relaxing day was going, and half the time, she wouldn't pick up. When she did, she always had some excuse. I was vacuuming, I was in the shower, I had my headphones on. At first, I brushed it off. But something in my gut told me to pay attention. And then, one day, I found out exactly why she wasn't answering my calls. When you've been with someone long enough, you start recognizing their patterns. Lisa had always been the kind of person who checked in, texting when she got to the grocery store, calling when she was on her way home. Just little things. Nothing obsessive, just normal couple stuff. But lately? She was different. I remember one specific day when my suspicion really took hold. It was a Tuesday, around noon. I was at work, bored, and decided to call Lisa just to chat. I let it ring. No answer. Waited a few minutes, tried again. Still nothing. Half an hour later, she finally called back. Hey, sorry, she said, her voice smooth but just a little too rehearsed. I was taking a nap. Now, normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. She had been talking about feeling drained lately. Maybe she really was resting. But something about the way she said it put me on edge. So I asked casually, "What have you been up to today?" "Oh, just the usual. Cleaned up a little, did some laundry. Watched some TV." It sounded normal. Except I had this nagging feeling in my gut, and I couldn't shake it. That night, I checked the home security app on my phone. We had a camera facing the front of the house, nothing fancy, just a basic setup. I scrolled back through the footage, expecting to see nothing but a quiet porch and maybe a delivery guy. Instead, I saw Lisa leaving the house around 10:30 a.m. She wasn't just stepping out to grab the mail or water the plants, she was dressed up. Nice jeans, a fitted top, her hair done. She looked good. The kind of good you put effort into. She got into her car and drove off. So much for just the usual. Now, I'm not the paranoid type. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she ran an errand and just forgot to mention it. Maybe she went to see a friend. I could have asked her outright, but something told me to wait. To watch. And I'm glad I did. Because what I found out next? That was the real gut punch. That night, I lay in bed next to Lisa, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone, completely unaware that I knew she'd left the house earlier. I wanted to ask her, just blurted out. "Where the hell did you go today?" But something stopped me. If she was lying about something, there was a reason. And if I confronted her too soon, she'd just cover her tracks better. No, I needed to be sure before I brought it up. So, I did something I never thought I'd do in my marriage. I started paying closer attention. Over the next few days, I took mental notes. Every time Lisa said she was home all day, I checked the camera. And every single time, without fail, she left the house for a few hours, only to return before I got back from work. That alone was suspicious, but not proof of anything, until I noticed a pattern. She always left around the same time, between 10 and 11 a.m. And she always came back around 2 p.m., like clockwork. Then something clicked. I wasn't sure why at first, but there was something oddly familiar about that time frame. And then I remembered Jason, my friend Mark's son, worked from home. Jason was in his mid-20s, worked some remote IT job, and had moved back into his parents' house to save money. I'd seen him around now and then, mostly at barbecues or game nights at Mark's place. Nice enough kid. Bit of a gym rat. Always glued to his phone. And then it hit me. Lisa wasn't just leaving the house randomly. She was leaving when Jason was home. I told myself I was being ridiculous. There was no way my wife, who had been with me for almost 20 years, was sneaking off to be with Jason. That was insane, right? Still, the thought wouldn't let me go. So I decided to put it to rest. The next day, I called Lisa around noon. She didn't answer. Again. I tried to keep my voice calm as I left a message. Hey, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. And then, on a whim, I shot a text to Mark. Me, hey man, how's work? You home today? Mark, nah, got a long shift. Won't be home till late. What's up? Nothing. That's what was up. Nothing, except the sick feeling in my stomach that told me I was about to find out something I didn't want to know. I opened my home security app, pulled up the live feed, and rewound the footage. There she was, Lisa, leaving the house at 10:45 a.m. sharp. Again. I switched over to Mark's home security app. See, he'd asked me to help set up his cameras months ago, and in the process, I'd added my email as a backup contact. Just in case. I'd never thought much about it until now. I clicked on the live view of his front porch. And there she was. Lisa. Standing at his front door. Ringing the bell. A few seconds later, Jason opened it. He looked around, probably checking to see if anyone was watching, then let her inside. And that's when my world cracked in half. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. There she was, my wife, walking into Mark's house in the middle of the day while his son, Jason, stood at the door, letting her in like it was routine. Because that's exactly what it was. A routine. She hadn't hesitated. No nervous glances over her shoulder, no sign of uncertainty. She had done this before. I don't know how long I sat there, gripping my phone like it could somehow change what I had just seen. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room. Another part wanted to rewind the footage again, just to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. But they weren't. She was there. With Jason. In his house. And I was at work, just like I had been every other day she pulled this stunt. The betrayal hit me like a slow-moving train, too heavy to stop, too painful to ignore. My brain scrambled for explanations, desperate to make sense of it. Maybe she was just visiting him? Maybe it's innocent? But I knew better. I'd seen the way she dressed before leaving. The way she lied to my face, saying she was home all day when she wasn't. The fact that she waited until Mark was out of the house before she went over. It was obvious. I needed more proof. I wanted to drive straight to Mark's house, bang on the door, and demand answers. But I forced myself to stay calm. Confronting her now would only give her time to spin some story. And if I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. So I sat back, took a deep breath, and started planning. I knew I had to play this smart. If I stormed in there like a jealous idiot, she'd just deny everything, maybe even make me feel like I was the crazy one. No, I needed undeniable proof. So I took a deep breath, swallowed the lump in my throat, and started thinking like a man who had something to lose. First, I saved the footage from Mark's camera and my own, downloading copies to a hidden folder on my laptop. I also backed them up to a cloud storage account she didn't know about. No way was I going to risk losing my evidence. Then I decided to see how deep this went. The next morning, I got up like usual, kissed Lisa goodbye, and headed to work, except I didn't actually go to work. Instead, I parked my car at a diner a few miles away and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 10:40 a.m., Lisa pulled out of the driveway, looking as put together as ever. Hair done. Nice jeans. Perfume, I bet. I followed at a safe distance, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. She drove straight to Mark's house. No stops. No hesitation. And just like the day before, Jason answered the door. And just like the day before, she stepped inside. I parked a little down the street, my pulse pounding in my ears. I could go up to that door right now, bust in, and catch them red-handed. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and did something that made my stomach twist into knots. I called Mark. "Hey, man," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "You at work?" "Yeah, what's up?" I hesitated for half a second before replying. "Listen, this is gonna sound weird, but can you check your security cameras real quick?" There was a pause. "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Just humor me." I heard him sigh, followed by some shuffling on his end. Then silence. Then, "What the hell?" I closed my eyes. He saw it too. "Lisa's at my house," he said, his voice tight. "With Jason." "Yeah, buddy. I know." "How long has this been going on?" Mark asked, his tone shifting from confusion to anger. I took a shaky breath. "I don't know. But I think we're about to find out. Because now, it wasn't just my wife and his son. Now, it was both of us. And we were done playing games." Mark went quiet on the phone, and for a moment, all I could hear was his breathing, slow, measured, controlled. "Stay there," he finally said, his voice low and sharp. "I'm on my way." He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching Mark's house from a distance. My heart was hammering in my chest, and a dozen different scenarios raced through my mind. What if they heard us coming? What if they ran? What if Lisa tried to gaslight me, turn the tables, or, worse, cry and make me feel guilty for even suspecting her? No. Not this time. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. I had proof, and soon, I'd have even more. About 15 minutes later, I saw Mark's truck pulling up fast. He parked on the curb and got out without hesitation, his face set like stone. He was a big guy, ex-military, and right now, he looked ready to kill someone. I got out of my car and walked toward him, trying to keep my own rage in check. "You ready for this?" I asked. Mark didn't answer. He just nodded once, his jaw tight, and turned toward the front door. Together, we walked up the steps, and before I could even knock, Mark reached for the handle. It was unlocked. He shoved the door open. The house was silent for a split second, then we heard it. A voice. Lisa's voice. She was laughing. And Jason's voice followed, low and smooth. "You're so bad." He chuckled. My stomach turned. Mark's fists clenched. We followed the sound down the hall, past the living room, toward a door that was slightly ajar. Mark didn't hesitate. He kicked the door open. And there they were. My wife. His son. Caught in the act. The door slammed against the wall with a loud bang, making both of them jump. Lisa let out a gasp, her eyes wide in shock. Jason scrambled, pulling a blanket over himself as if that could somehow undo what we'd just seen. Mark's face was pure rage, his fists clenched at his sides. I could feel my own blood boiling, but somehow, I stayed frozen in place, staring at the woman I had trusted for nearly 2 decades. Lisa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Don't. I cut her off, my voice sharp. I didn't want to hear whatever excuse she was about to come up with. Jason, to his credit, or maybe stupidity, tried to speak. "It's not what it looks like." Mark lunged. He grabbed his son by the arm and yanked him off the bed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You better explain to me right now why the hell my best friend's wife is in your bed." Jason's face was pale, but he didn't say a word. Lisa, still wrapped in the sheets, suddenly snapped out of her daze. "Mark, stop! You're scaring him!" Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I'm scaring him? I'm the problem here?" He turned to me. "You hear that, man? This ain't about her screwing around with my kid. It's about me being too scary." I shook my head, my voice eerily calm. "Lisa. How long?" She blinked. What? I took a step closer, locking eyes with her. "How long?" She swallowed hard. Her hands gripped the blanket tighter, her breathing shaky. I don't know. Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. You don't know? What kind of answer is that? Jason finally spoke up, his voice weak. A few months. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. A few months. While I was at work. While I trusted her. While I thought she was home, relaxing, maybe enjoying her new, stress-free life. I nodded slowly. My hands were shaking, but I kept them at my sides. I see. Lisa started crying. Please let me explain. But I was already walking away. Because there was nothing left to say. I walked out of that room without another word. Lisa was crying behind me, calling my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to hear it. Mark followed me, his footsteps heavy with anger. Behind us, I could hear Jason stammering something to his father, trying to explain, trying to find a way out of the disaster he had created. I didn't care. I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing for my wife. No love. No sadness. Just a hollow emptiness where something used to be. Mark walked up beside me, running a hand through his hair. What now? Good question. I turned to him. You do whatever you gotta do with your son. I need to figure out how to get her out of my house. Mark exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I still can't believe this. He looked back at his house, then at me. You gonna be okay? I let out a dry chuckle. Not today. But soon. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I got in my car and drove home. Lisa showed up an hour later. Her face was red, her makeup smudged, her whole body trembling like she was the victim here. Can we talk? She asked as she stepped inside. I crossed my arms. You have 5 minutes. She wiped at her face, took a shaky breath, and said the one thing I really wasn't expecting. I still love you. I laughed. Actually laughed. And then I said the one thing she wasn't expecting. Good. You can love me from a distance. Because as far as I was concerned, this marriage was done. Lisa stood there in the doorway, her eyes red and desperate. She clutched the strap of her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. Please, she whispered. Just let me explain. I should have told her to get out. I should have slammed the door in her face. But part of me wanted to hear it. Not because I thought she had a good excuse, there was no good excuse, but because I wanted to hear how she was going to spin this. So I let her talk. She stepped inside hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome anymore. She wasn't. I never meant for this to happen. She started. It got out of control. I crossed my arms. You accidentally ended up in bed with my friend's son? Multiple times? She flinched at my tone. No, I mean, I wasn't happy, okay? I felt alone. I raised an eyebrow. Alone? You quit your job. I paid for everything. I've been here. Every damn day. She ran a hand through her hair, shaking her head. It's not about money. It's about, I don't know, feeling seen. Jason listened to me. He made me feel wanted. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. So your solution was to screw around with someone half your age? My friend's son? Tears welled up in her eyes. I wasn't thinking. No, Lisa. You were thinking. Every single time you left this house, you thought about it. Every time you lied to me on the phone, you thought about it. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She opened her mouth, then closed it, like she wanted to argue but knew she couldn't. For a long moment, we just stood there. Then I sighed and pointed toward the hallway. Go pack a bag. Her face crumpled. Please, no. Lisa. My voice was firm. Go pack a bag. You're not staying here tonight. She broke down sobbing, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I stood there and watched as she walked to our bedroom, dragging her feet like a child being sent to their room. And as I listened to her move around, grabbing clothes and stuffing them into a suitcase, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was done. Lisa took her time packing, probably hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't. I stood in the living room, arms crossed, waiting. When she finally came out, her suitcase rolling behind her, she stopped in front of me, her eyes full of silent pleas. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked softly. I shrugged. "Not my problem." She blinked, like she couldn't believe I'd just said that. But it wasn't my job to fix this for her. She had burned this marriage to the ground. I wasn't going to be the one to clean up the ashes. She hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "I still love you." I let out a breath, shaking my head. "If you loved me, we wouldn't be here." She looked down, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. But I didn't comfort her. Not this time. I opened the front door. "Goodbye, Lisa." For a second, I thought she was going to fight it, beg, make one last desperate attempt to fix what she had broken. But instead, she nodded slowly and walked past me, out the door and into the night. I watched as she dragged her suitcase to her car, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look back. The moment she drove away, I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. The house was quiet, eerily so, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel wrong. It felt peaceful. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and a whole lot of emotional whiplash. Lisa tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored her. Mark, on the other hand, was handling his own storm. Jason had packed up and left town after their confrontation. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I started going to the gym, picked up old hobbies I had neglected, and reconnected with friends I had lost touch with. And you know what? I was okay. Because in the end, Lisa's betrayal wasn't the end of my life.